pattern where the pilot's head had struck it. There was a large, rust-colored stain there. Oi trotted over to where 3 rusty propeller blades rose from the grass, sniffed at them, then returned hastily to Jake. The man in the cockpit was a dust-dry mummy wearing a padded leather vest and a helmet with a spike on top. His lips were gone, his teeth exposed in a final, desperate grimace. Fingers large as sausages, but were now only skin-covered bones, clutched the wheel. His skull was caved in where it had hit the canopy, and Roland guessed that the greenish-gray scales which coated the left side of his face were all that remained of his brains. The dead man's head was tilted back, as if he had been sure, even at the moment of his death, that he could regain the sky again. The plane's remaining wing still jutted from the encroaching grass. On it was a fading insignia which depicted a fist holding a thunderbolt.
Looks like Aunt Talitha was wrong and the old albino man had the right of it after all,
Susanna said in an awed voice.
That must be David Quick, the outlaw prince. Look at the size of him, Roland. They must have had to grease him to get him into the cockpit.
Roland nodded. The heat and the years had wasted the man in the mechanical bird to no more than a skeleton wrapped in dry hide, but he could still see how broad the shoulders had been, and the misshapen head was massive. So fell Lord Perth, he said, and the countryside did shake with that thunder. Jake looked at him questioningly. It's from an old poem. Lord Perth was a giant who went forth to war with 1,000 men, but he was still in his own country when a little boy threw a stone at him and hit him in the knee. He stumbled, the weight of his armor bore him down, and he broke his neck in the fall. Jake said, like our story of David and Goliath. There was no fire, Eddie said. I bet he just ran out of gas and tried a dead-stick landing on the road. He might have been an outlaw and a barbarian, but he had a yard of guts. Roland nodded and looked at Jake. You all right with this?
Yes. If the guy was still, runny, I might not be.
Jake looked from the dead man in the airplane to the city. Ludd was much closer and clearer now, and although they could see many broken windows in the towers, he, like Eddie, had not entirely given up hope of finding some sort of help there.
I bet things sort of fell apart in the city once he was gone.
I think you'd win that bet, Roland said.
You know something?
Jake was studying the plane again.
The people who built that city might have made their own airplanes, but I'm pretty sure this is one of ours. I did a school paper on air combat when I was in the 5th grade, and I think I recognize it. Roland, can I take a closer look?
Roland nodded. I'll go with you. Together they walked over to the plane, with the high grass swishing at their paths.
Look, Jake said. See the machine gun under the wing? That's an air-cooled German model. And this is a Focke-Wulf from just before World War II. I'm sure it is. So what's it doing here?
Lots of planes disappear, Eddie said. Take the Bermuda Triangle, for instance. That's a place over one of our oceans, Roland. It's supposed to be jinxed. Maybe it's a great big doorway between our worlds, one that's almost always open. Eddie hunched his shoulders and essayed a bad Rod Serling imitation. Fasten your seatbelts and prepare for turbulence. You're flying into the Roland zone. Jake and Roland, who were now standing beneath the plane's remaining wing, ignored him.
Boost me up, Roland.
Roland shook his head. That wing looks solid, but it's not. This thing has been here a long time, Jake. You'd fall.
Make a step, then.
Eddie said, I'll do it, Roland. Roland studied his diminished right hand for a moment, shrugged, then laced his hands together. This'll do, he's light. Jake shook off his moccasin and then stepped lightly into the stirrup Roland had made. Oi began to bark shrilly, though whether in excitement or alarm, Roland couldn't tell. Jake's chest was now pressing against one of the airplane's rusty flaps, and he was looking right at the fist and thunderbolt design. It had peeled up a little from the surface of the wing along one edge. He seized this flap and pulled. It came off the wing so easily that he would have fallen backward if Eddie, standing directly behind him, hadn't steadied him with a hand on the butt.
I knew it, Jake said.
There was another symbol beneath the fist and thunderbolt, and now it was almost totally revealed. It was a swastika.
I just wanted to see it. You can put me down now.
They started out again, But they could see the tail of the plane every time they looked back that afternoon, looming out of the high grass like Lord Perth's burial monument.
EV repaired. Now it's
2.
to the objective.
It was Jake's turn to make the fire that night. When the wood was laid to the gunslinger's satisfaction, he handed Jake his flint and steel. Let's see how you do. Eddie and Susanna were sitting off to one side, their arms linked companionably about each other's waist. Toward the end of the day, Eddie had found a bright yellow flower beside the road and had picked it for her. Tonight, Susanna was wearing it in her hair, and every time she looked at Eddie, her lips curved in a small smile, and her eyes filled with light. Roland had noted these things, and they pleased him. Their love was deepening, strengthening. That was good. It would have to be deep and strong indeed if it was to survive the months and years ahead. Jake struck a spark, but it flashed inches away from the kindling. "Move your flint in closer," Roland said, "and hold it steady. And don't hit it with the steel, Jake. Scrape it." Jake tried again, and this time the spark flashed directly into the kindling. There was a little tendril of smoke, but no fire. "I don't think I'm very good at this." "You'll get it. Meantime, think on this. What's dressed when night falls and undressed when day breaks?" "Huh?" Roland moved Jake's hands even closer to the little pile of kindling. "I guess that one's not in your book." "Oh, it's a riddle." Jake struck another spark. This time a small flame glowed in the kindling before dying out. "You know some of those too?" Roland nodded. "Not just some, a lot. As a boy, I must have known 1,000. They were part of my studies." "Really? Why would anyone study riddles?" "Van Ney, my tutor, said a boy who could answer a riddle was a boy who could think around corners. We had riddling contests every Friday noon, and the boy or girl who won could leave school early." "Did you get to leave early often, Roland?" Susanna asked. He shook his head, smiling a little himself. "I enjoyed riddling, but I was never very good at it. Van Ney said it was because I thought too deeply. My father said it was because I had too little imagination. I think they were both right, but I think my father had a little more of the truth. I could always haul a gun faster than any of my mates and shoot straighter, but I've never been much good at thinking around corners." Susanna, who had watched closely as Roland dealt with the old people of River Crossing, thought the gunslinger was underrating himself, but she said nothing. Sometimes on winter nights there would be riddling competitions in the Great Hall. When it was just the Junkers, Alain always won. When the grown-ups played as well, it was always Court. He'd forgotten more riddles than the rest of us ever knew, and after the fair day riddling, Court always carried home the goose. Riddles have great power, and everyone knows one or two. "Even me," Eddie said. "For instance, why did the dead baby cross the road?" "That's dumb, Eddie," Susanna said, but she was smiling. "Because it was stapled to the chicken," Eddie yelled and grinned when Jake burst into laughter, knocking his little pile of kindling apart. "Yuck, yuck, yuck. I got 1,000,000 of them, folks." Roland, however, didn't laugh. He looked, in fact, a trifle offended. "Pardon me for saying so, Eddie, but that is rather silly." "Jesus, Roland, I'm sorry," Eddie said. He was still smiling, but he sounded slightly peeved. "I keep forgetting you got your sense of humor shot off in the Children's Crusade or whatever it was." "It's just that I take riddling seriously. I was taught that the ability to solve them indicates a sane and rational mind." "Well, they're never going to replace the works of Shakespeare or the quadratic equation," Eddie said. "I mean, let's not get carried away." Jake was looking at Roland thoughtfully. "My book said riddling is the oldest game people still play. In our world, I mean. And riddles used to be really serious business, not just jokes. People used to get killed over them." Roland was looking out into the growing darkness. Yes, I'd seen it happen. He was remembering a fair day riddling which had ended not with the giving of the prize goose, but with a cross-eyed man in a cap of bells dying in the dirt with a dagger in his chest. Court's dagger. The man had been a wandering singer and acrobat who had attempted to cheat Court by stealing the judge's pocketbook, in which the answers were kept on small scraps of bark. "Well, excuse me," Eddie said. Susanna was looking at Jake. "I forgot all about the book of riddles you carried over. May I look at it now?" "Sure. It's in my pack. The answers are gone, though. Maybe that's why Mr. Tower gave it to me for free. His shoulder was suddenly seized, and with painful force. What was his name? Roland asked.
Mr. Tower, Jake said. Calvin Tower. Didn't I tell you that?
No. Roland slowly relaxed his grip on Jake's shoulder. But now that I hear it, I suppose I'm not surprised.
The objective.
Eddie had opened Jake's pack and found Riddle-de-Dum. He tossed it to Susanna. "You know," he said, "I always thought that dead baby joke was pretty good. Tasteless, maybe, but pretty good." "I don't care about taste," Roland said. "It's senseless and unsolvable, and that's what makes it silly. A good riddle is neither."
Jesus, you guys did take this stuff seriously, didn't you?
Yes. Jake, meanwhile, had been restacking the kindling and mulling over the riddle which had started the discussion. Now he suddenly smiled. "A fire! That's the answer, right? Dress it at night, undress it in the morning. If you change dress to build, it's simple." "That's it." Roland returned Jake's smile, but his eyes were on Susanna, watching as she thumbed through the small, tattered book. He thought, looking at her studious frown and the absent way she readjusted the yellow flower in her hair when it tried to slip free, that she alone might sense that the tattered book of riddles could be as important as Charlie the Choo-Choo, maybe more important. He looked from her to Eddie and felt a recurrence of his irritation at Eddie's foolish riddle. The young man bore another resemblance to Cuthbert, this one rather unfortunate. Roland sometimes felt like shaking him until his nose bled and his teeth fell out. "Soft, gunslinger, soft." Court's voice, not quite laughing, spoke up in his head, and Roland resolutely put his emotions at arm's length. It was easier to do that when he remembered that Eddie couldn't help his occasional forays into nonsense. Character was also at least partly formed by Ka, and Roland knew well that there was more to Eddie than nonsense. Any time he started thinking that wasn't so, he would do well to remember their conversation by the side of the road 3 nights before, when Eddie had accused him of using them as markers on his own private game board. That had angered him, but it had been close enough to the truth to shame him as well. Blissfully unaware of these long thoughts, Eddie now inquired, "What's green, weighs 100 tons, and lives at the bottom of the